I was at the Leatherneck bar in Las Vegas.
Wow. That's
Cut the
wonderful.
cake, commandant's message, the whole nine. I don't mean to be too brutal about it, but it was really a great thing. Ceremony is so great and so fun, and just really brings out the history of the United States Marine Corps. It was pretty fun. So.
Sounds
Okay,
wonderful.
we are now streaming on YouTube. I'm going to hit the record button, Mayor, if that's all right. I show 7 o'clock. All right, we're good to go. Mayor, you're muted.
Yes, I am. So 7 o'clock, let's get going on this. So tonight we have a city council special meeting agenda. This is going to be remote access only via Zoom. It is being recorded and is going live on YouTube as well. And tonight is Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, and it is 7 p.m. And with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And we're going to go right into, let's go ahead and get a roll call, Kelly.
Councilmember Daughtry,
Present.
Councilmember Peter Shagan,
Present.
Councilmember Frederick,
Present.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Present?
Councilmember Jorstad,
Present.
Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
Councilmember Tagent.
Present.
Excellent. So we have everybody here. So we're going to go right into our one action item for tonight, and that is Resolution 2020-25, Property Surplus. Russ.
Hey, thank you, Mayor and Council. At our last meeting, we had an executive session where we talked about a couple of properties that the city was considering surplusing. And so we've brought a resolution before you tonight to look at the surplus of two properties. One would be one of the downtown parcels that would be left over after Mill Spur is completed. There's a map in there, and it's described as Parcel C, and it's a parcel of about 24,000 square feet. After the city completes its boundary line adjustment, it would be ready to go on the market, and the proceeds could be put back into our development of the downtown and other capital projects. The second property would be the building that the subway and the physical therapy building are housed in near the police station. Originally, that building was being reserved for expansion of the police department. However, there are a lot of tenants in there, and there have been some issues with us being landlords and just wanting to keep that business used for commercial purpose rather than going to another public purpose at this point. So with that, the recommendation has been moved forward that we do surplus both of these properties. There's a resolution attached for council's action, and I'm happy to address any questions that you may have.
How far from going to market are these two properties, timeline wise?
The property near South Lake Stevens Road, we can probably get that listed within a couple of weeks. We would need to put some marketing materials together and work with our attorney's office on an approach. The property downtown is probably a little bit farther behind. Again, we have to complete that boundary line adjustment and a couple of phases, steps before that.
Russ, this is Gary. Just as a tag along to Steve's question, how would you go about marketing this property?
The idea is we would do direct marketing through our website, not really intending to get a broker involved. And there is a consultant that's reached out to us that said he'd be happy to share some thoughts. So we'll probably take him up on that and get some ideas from other cities that have done this. And Gene also has lots of experience from his time in Monroe with property sales.
I do have a question. What is the square footage of that particular piece of land, the one where the subway is now? How big is that area?
Sure. That property is just about 3/4 of an acre.
Okay.
I've got a question. So my concern would be is, do we need space for the police department to grow? When we look at surplusing this piece of property and we look at moving it along down the line, is the police, excuse me, the police department have enough room to grow into the current space they have? And is this a concern for us that maybe this is a piece we need to hang on to?
I will let the mayor and the chief answer that question.
So that is something that we talked about. And, when we initially, and Chief Fix, correct me if I'm wrong, when we initially talked about the police department maybe needing to use this, we were talking about a 5-year-ish time frame. And I think when we look at options we would have in 5 years of other, maybe other buildings, or possibly trying to pick up another piece of property closer to the current property we're remodeling for the police department, we might be able to do some expansion there. And the idea to keep this a commercial property that's revenue generating for the city makes much more sense.
Great question. Great answer.
I have a question, and maybe we already talked about this. My apologies if this has been discussed. How long has the city owned that property?
Just about a year.
Okay. Is there any concern that that selling? I remember a conversation about maybe it was the appraisal amount that was lower than anticipated. Is there any concern about the timing of selling the property and whether financially this is the most advantageous time? Is that, I know it's hard to predict the market, but.
Yeah, I would say it is hard to predict market trends. Obviously, we've have a couple of appraisals for that site, and we would open it up, to the market. It's would be just like any real estate transaction, that we would value it at what we think that it's worth, and then what purchasers would be willing to pay for it, and that would be any market climate. So.
Mm-hmm.
How are we evaluating the property? We have appraisal on it, and that appraisal is how old?
We just had an appraisal completed.
Okay, and what's the value on it? We're going to go with the highest of the market standard because the market's really, really hot right now. So we're expecting to gain top dollar on this right now. Is that correct?
That was our thought, that we would go in at the top range of the comps that were in that appraisal.
Okay. Great. I said I don't want to sell an asset for the city that I think we can grow into or do anything unless we're gaining top of the market value, right? And if we're not top of the market value, I would be disappointed that we're doing something right now.
Yep. And council would obviously have to approve any sale that came along or offer. So there's no commitment on the city's part to sell if we don't get the fair market value that we think that property is worth.
Is that top of the market value amount more than what we paid for it last year?
It would be probably equivalent.
I was wondering if the chief had anything to add to this. Put you on the spot.
Well, of course, I'll defer to the city.
So the market's gone up in the last, so you can say last year, but the market's gone up last year. So I want to make sure that we understand that if we're talking about top of the top of the market wasn't a year ago. So I don't know what we're marking at. I trust that we will be at the top of the market if we're going to do this. But the top of the market wasn't a year ago. The market's moved at least 7% from where it was a year ago. So if I can get a confirmation on that, Russ.
Yes, that's what our goal would be.
I'm not understanding you just said a moment ago that it was what it was appraised about a year ago. Are we doing it what we marketed a year ago? Are we adding a percentage to a year ago, or where are we doing this?
The current appraisal, and I don't know how much of that we want to talk about in an open session since it deals with real property.
So we can go to
Value.
executive session and talk about it if we need to.
Yeah, and that might be more appropriate, but.
So we can move to next meetings and talk about it. I'm not willing to let prime pre-sale property go at below market value when this is something that it helps us advance the whole community forward with property. So if you can't talk about it in session right now, and we're looking at prices from a year ago, I would be disappointed.
Yeah, we are looking at some current prices, but obviously you weren't at the last meeting. So if it's something
Right.
we'd like to move over to the next meeting, I don't think there's a rush in taking this action tonight. Then we can share that information with you more fully.
Great.
Gene, Mayor, make sense?
It works for me. And again, nothing would be done until council approves it. So we could still gin up all the materials, get everything ready to go, and at least take those steps. And then brief Marcus. We did brief the other council members at the last meeting. I apologize. We didn't get a chance to connect between then and now, that information, but we did just get an appraisal. It's only a couple weeks old.
You muted, Marcus. You muted, Marcus.
Sorry, I apologize. I apologize. I went to the last meeting, but I want to make sure that we are at the top of the market for the city with property that we're selling right now, because the market is an extremely live pace right now.
Understood.
So Marcus, do you not want to go forward with this until we do an executive session, or do
We
you
can
want
move forward with it, but I'm not going to be, if we're below market, we should be getting a lot of suitors for this property. So we can move forward with it, but I would expect to see, if we're not at the current market value, we should see a lot of people. And I'm not willing to choose an offer unless we're at the top of the market.
Yeah, and I think in reviewing offers, we can make sure we're there.
Yep, great. I'm great with moving forward. The lower price on it, if we're 7 to 8 to 10 to 15% below market, we should find a lot of suitors for this property, and we'll take it as it comes.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, with that, can I get a motion on this action item?
I move to approve resolution in 2020-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Councilmember Ewing on to pass resolution 2020-25 property surplus. Any further discussion? All those.
Would it be appropriate to pass this resolution based on what Marcus's comments are?
You want me to answer that, Neil? This is the first step in the public process, is surplusing the property. The city can always choose not to sell that property at any point in time, but this step has to happen before we do any marketing work or spool things up. We need to have clarification if we're moving forward.
I guess the only thing I would say is we surplused a lot of property on 20th Street Southeast at a very extremely reasonable rate. And they were supposed to have properties demolished and do things they were supposed to do. And they didn't necessarily do everything they were supposed to do on time, at least the way I saw it. And we gave them a lot of grace. And those properties on 20th Street Southeast are going to be extremely profitable for them. I don't want to let properties go at affordable rates anymore. I want to make sure that we are getting the best price for our constituents in the city to make sure that we gain the most value and the most leverage for these properties. I don't want to value something a year ago on appraisal value that we should be at today's appraisal dollar values. That's the only thing I'm concerned with.
Yeah, and Marcus, we have an appraisal that was done a month ago on this property.
Great. Well, I just, the market changes every day. Brett, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I don't want to disagree with you. If we've got an appraisal from a month ago, it's just when we buy properties at the top of the market.
Yeah.
We always are forced to buy stuff at the top of the market. We should be selling our properties at the top of the market to fetch the best price for our constituents, to get as much money for where we're going from. That's all my only concern is. That's the only concern I have.
I think we all agree with you.
Yeah, great.
So I have a motion on the floor. Any further
a second.
discussion?
You already had a second.
We do have a second. So I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And any opposed? Okay, motion passes. So we will move out of the special session portion of our meeting and into our workshop for the evening. And our first item on the workshop is adoption of building and fire codes. Ryan, that's you. How long will you need for this subject? Ryan, you're muted if you're.
Sorry, you cut out. I didn't realize you were talking to me on that.
Okay.
I've got a pretty good chunk of info to go over. I'll try to get through it quickly, but I don't expect this first one maybe 20, 25, 30 minutes max.
Okay. All right, let's do it.
So I'll try to move through it pretty quickly. If there's any questions or if I'm moving too fast, then definitely let me know. Okay, so now I go to Kelly. I share this.
Yeah, you should have permission, Ryan.
Okay. And let me go. Give me a second here.
Looks good, Ryan.
Okay. So, building and fire codes. I've got the fire marshal here to also give us some information when we get to that portion. But the reason for meeting with you today is that the city is required to regularly update and adopt a building codes in accordance with the state regulations. Today serves to initiate that process for the 2018 code cycle. We will review the code cycle background and discuss the limitations of amendments by local authorities, present the staff recommendations for code amendments, and then request council's direction moving forward. So the National Code Councils publish model codes on a 3-year cycle. We are currently on the 2015 code cycle, which was adopted by the city in 2016. There are 11 model codes adopted by the state in addition to various standards. And some of the most common ones are here on the screen: the building code, residential code, fire, plumbing, mechanical, energy code. And then, as I mentioned, there's several more beyond that. The Washington State Building Code Council, or SBCC, amends and adopts the model codes that local jurisdictions must also adopt. Many local jurisdictions then further amend the codes to address local conditions. The new code cycle typically takes effect 1 year after an updated code edition is published. However, the 2018 code cycle has been delayed twice and currently takes effect on February 1st, 2021. Local jurisdictions can make limited amendments which are equal or more restrictive than the model code. Generally, local amendments cannot diminish the model code requirements. However, one notable exception is the ability to exempt fire sprinklers in single-family homes. Local amendments to the Washington State Energy Code are prohibited beyond the administrative provisions, and the ADA and elderly provisions are mandated by state and federal laws and cannot be modified. So the codes are revised each cycle to increase the safety and durability of buildings and evolve with new materials, processes, and local laws. Examples of significant changes in the 2018 code cycle include more energy efficient buildings, introduction of requirements for cross-laminated timber or CLT, which is a relatively new construction material, and then more detailed requirements specific to marijuana growing and processing. Several model codes are integral with one another, where certain requirements are based on provisions in another code. For example, the building code requirements for construction type and occupancy class coincide with the requirements in the fire code for sprinklers and separation of uses. Lake Stevens has currently adopted the model codes as required by Washington State SBCC. However, most building codes were adopted with minimal to no local amendments. Some benefits to not amending the code are easier adoption and integration with our municipal code, and the base model codes are generally effective. Some drawbacks to not amending is inconsistency with other jurisdictions in the region. The model code doesn't always address local conditions or processes very effectively. And also unamended model codes do not contain the same level of detail to support a local jurisdiction's application of the codes. The city fire code is currently amended heavily for sprinklers, access roads, and fire hydrant requirements. Those amendments create different requirements in Lake Stevens, which can be difficult and confusing for customers. It also creates a lack of consistency with other partner cities, which are served by the same fire district. And the majority of the model code is effective without the need for numerous amendments. Many local conditions can be addressed through the application of fire district standards. And now the difference between standards and codes standards are more about defining the method to construct or protect something, whereas the code itself will specify which structures must be protected and the level of that protection. And that's similar to the application of accessibility requirements in the building code, where the building code dictates where accessibility is required, and the ADA standards contain how to achieve that. So our options for code adoptions, we have option one is basically maintain status quo and adopt the 2018 model building codes with little to no local amendments, only revising Lake Stevens Municipal Code to reflect the 2018 code cycle. And with that, we retain the current local amendments in our adoption of the 2018 fire code. Option two, or part A of option two for building code amendments, which is staff recommendation, would be to adopt the 2018 model codes with local amendments to replace administrative provisions across all codes. Some examples of administrative provisions include permit application and issuance, permit expirations, and permit exemptions. Currently, each separate code contains a chapter with the administrative provisions of that code. So several jurisdictions associated with the eGov Alliance, mybuildingpermit.com, have developed a common administrative code, or CAC, and they've adopted it with their local construction codes. The common code replaces chapter 1 in each model code, and that chapter contains the administrative provisions for that code. So prior publications had a single administrative code where these new I codes do not. So in addition to creating one common chapter containing all administrative provisions, the benefits to this method include a high level of consistency across many local jurisdictions in the region, which fosters a collaborative environment in applying the codes with other jurisdictions. Excuse me. Okay, so that also creates consistency for regional builders who work in several jurisdictions. So common amendments create a more predictable experience across jurisdictions and help builders know what to expect when working with the city of Lake Stevens. Amended codes also allow the city to tailor our process, not only to be more consistent regionally, but to address local conditions more effectively. It allows predictable dates for expiration and renewal of permits, which will expire on a set date from issuance, versus the current provisions will extend the expiration date for 180 days with each inspection. And that auto extension creates issues with projects that can extend for years legally under the code and across subsequent code cycles. Or we'll have customers calling for inspections on work that is not ready simply to push out their expiration date. The amended permit exemptions can be defined with greater detail, which allows for more uniform application of the codes. Another benefit, it allows the city to clearly define when permits are required or not. Minor work currently requiring permits can be exempted, such as solar systems on single-family homes and non-structural siding or window replacement. A common code also resolves possible conflicts between administrative provision. I'm having difficulty with that. Administrative provisions within various adopted codes. So for instance, fees, violations, expirations, etc. The amendments will improve the administrative provisions by allowing the addition of provisions which may not be addressed in the differing construction codes. And finally, a single reference for administrative provisions makes it easier when updating provisions during later code cycles. Specifically, there's only one code to amend versus amending numerous codes. They also allow for code requirements to reflect the actual practices of a city. For example, we currently do not issue a certificate of occupancy on single-family homes where the final approval of the permit will serve as the CO. So now we move into staff recommendations for the details on the fire code adoption, and I'll hand it over to the fire marshal to take us home from here.
Thanks, Ryan, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the proposed, at least the staff recommendation for the fire code adoption for the 2018 code cycle. We're already challenged by the fact that we're 3 years behind in our adoption of the 2018 code. But what we've looked at as a fire district and with the city staff, who, by the way, have been very supportive of the fire district proposals, is to create an opportunity where the fire district has sort of a common code throughout the cities we protect, which are the city of Lake Stevens, the city of Monroe, and the city of Mill Creek. And so the proposal is to make each city's fire code adoption synchronized. Basically, all 3 cities would have the same sort of adoption of the code language in the adopting language for the fire code. In the city of Lake Stevens currently, that, as Ryan mentioned, there's a good deal of amendment already existing. And we don't feel like moving forward that those amendments are necessary. And in fact, most of the amendments which exist today are things that we would normally see in a standard, like engineering and design standards or fire district standards, that sort of thing. So our proposal really is to adopt what the state has adopted for the state fire code. If we don't do anything locally, then we're left with what the state has adopted. And that's really essentially what we're proposing, with very minor changes to that, and mostly related to ensuring fire department access within the fire district, within the city. It's interesting that in our state's adoption of the fire code, they kind of strip out all those sections related to how do we get a fire truck from the fire station to wherever it's going. But that's what's been done locally. And so what we've done is we've taken all that language, which is in the model code, but stripped out by the state, and we've kind of put it back in as an appendix with some other provisions for fire department access, most of which are already there in the current city code. We're just making minor tweaks to that, none of which I think would be substantive to council, but I'm certainly glad to answer any questions about that. And then the other item that we propose is to lower the commercial fire sprinkler threshold from the existing 10,000 square feet for new construction, and bring that threshold down to a 5,000 square foot threshold. That's a significant change, but it also brings the city of Lake Stevens and the city of Monroe into conformity with each other's adopted codes with that, with the commercial fire sprinkler threshold. In the city of Mill Creek, which we also protect, there really is very little commercial space left, and so it's insignificant in that city. And so I'll turn it back to Ryan, but I'll certainly be glad to answer any questions, or either tonight or following tonight's meeting.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, that does move us on to questions. Are there any questions or anything you'd like me to go over, or Mike for that matter?
Yeah, Mike, could you answer the question on the last slide? The last paragraph on there said that firewalls do not constitute separate buildings for the purpose of what? Oh, I understand. Never mind. I got it.
Yeah, and that's maintaining
It took me a second.
That's maintaining existing code language.
Right. So basically, if you get the 5,000 square foot threshold, if you had two 5,000 foot or a 10,000 foot building and somebody tried to put a firewall in between to say that we don't meet the threshold, then it would still meet the requirements.
You're still putting fire sprinklers in the building. You can't put a firewall up and call it a separate building and avoid having to protect the community with fire sprinklers.
Okay.
That's what that's trying to say. Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
So that is an amendment that the city currently has over the base model code. That's a good example. The model code would allow a complying firewall to be constructed in lieu of fire sprinklers. Now, with the firewall, you have got some other things as far as structural independence. It's essentially two buildings to where if one half burned down, the other side would be completely self-supporting in that sense. And right now we don't allow that. And so we want to maintain that requirement.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Gary.
Appreciate your presentation, gentlemen. I'm in the business and I'm having a hard time understanding all this stuff. So my first question is, of many, is, has this been run by industry as far as comments? I guess what is the running up the flagpole? What has taken place?
Gary, I would go on to that, say, has master builders weighed in on this?
I don't believe so. And so that's why I'm asking the question.
Master builders to weigh in on before I make any kind of decision on this.
So this is actually just an initial presentation to kind of give council the idea of what we're looking at before we get into the nuts and bolts of making official proposals or amendments to our code. I will say that I would be surprised if master builders were not supportive of the common administrative code, because I know they work with a lot of MVP cities and have supported the similar proposals as this.
I will say I'm not concerned about what any other city is doing. I'm only concerned about the city of Lake Stevens.
Fair enough.
I don't care what Mill Creek is doing or any other city. Lake Stevens is its own city, and I'm not concerned about what any other city's doing.
So I guess that's okay. A little bit of a clarification. So this is kind of the first go around, I guess you might say, that running it through the system before you go do some outreach to some professional organizations. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Great. I appreciate that. Did I hear you say that there are no building permits required for the installation of solar panels on single-family residences?
No, currently there are, but that is a very commonly exempted item. And it's, in some cases, the state actually encourages local jurisdictions to exempt them when they meet certain conditions, such as fire access in between the panels, that they are under a certain weight per square foot, and the arrays don't exceed, Mike help me, 350 feet, 350 lineal feet or something to that nature.
So is that an exemption in the city of Lake Stevens then?
Not currently.
Not currently. Okay.
No. It's just
So-
an example of one of the things that we could exempt if we wanted to, but at this point it hasn't been proposed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I made a couple other notes, and I think Mr. Fitzgerald clarified those. So, but there's one question on here. You made mention that the Section 503, the state did not adopt that portion of the fire code.
That's
And
right.
I guess a reasoning why they didn't, and yet local jurisdictions did.
So the state leaves it up to local jurisdictions, and specifically in the adopting language of the state's adoption of the state fire code, it specifically reads that this section is not adopted, and rather local jurisdictions shall determine how how access is achieved, how roadways are maintained, and essentially what they're doing is they're saying it's up to your local standards to determine how roadways are constructed and maintained. And that's really what we're jumping on board with here in this proposal, is to say, yep, we agree with that. You shouldn't necessarily put that into the body of the code to say, here's how this road shall be. Rather, the code says a road shall be here, and you go to the standards to determine how that road is constructed and how it's maintained.
So that Appendix D of the Model Code provision of Section 503 deals with access?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right. I think that's all the questions I have at this point. Again, I not understanding the process, I guess I would certainly hope that we do some outreach with the professional organizations and get some input as to the impacts on this. I know from a builder standpoint, there is costs involved, and I guess I would be curious to find out what those costs are, just so that we keep in mind, we talk about affordable housing, and yet we seem to ratchet up regulations all the time that do impact the basic cost of providing housing. So,
Gary, I couldn't agree more. When we talk about this, the costs go significantly higher every little change we make for these developers and builders.
just a point of education, maybe for our fellow council members, and Ryan, maybe you can answer this. In the new code, it is my understanding that within the crawl space, there will not be allowed any heating mechanisms, trunk lines, things of that sort allowed in crawl space because they are outside the building envelope. Is that accurate?
I haven't reviewed the energy code that closely, but there are further restrictions when they are outside the condition envelope. Generally, what that means is they have to meet a tighter threshold for their leakage test. And I have not seen that in regards to single family residences, but there were quite a bit of changes in the energy code. And again, with the energy code, there were mandated. We don't have legal authority to amend that out, but I can certainly look into that in the 2018 code and give you a definitive answer.
Okay. Again, it just kind of gets back to that issue of cost. And if you're not allowed to put heat ducts in a crawl space, holy cow.
Yeah. And that's the way the energy code has moved. For instance, you used to be able to do the heat ducts in the exterior walls and unconditioned spaces, and now you cannot do that, or they have to be within the conditioned envelope to where you insulate the exterior wall and then bring the duct in, which typically means furring out the wall. And again, that's an additional cost. But right. One thing I want to stress is the administrative provisions that I would propose. They generally don't affect the actual requirements for construction for any of the codes, for energy codes, for the building codes. They basically just address the requirements for issuing permits, for maintaining permits, and things of that nature. It wouldn't go to change anything as far as now you have to use a different construction method or anything that would be a cost increase.
But also, we're trying to incentivize commercial to come to Lake Stevens versus not come to Lake Stevens. And when we add more costs, 10,000 versus 5,000 square foot of sprinkler space, all those things, these are all way heavy on commercial coming to Lake Stevens. And we're trying to incentivize commercial to come here and be part of 20th Street Northeast, try to be part of our community, industrial space, incubator space, all these different things. And once again, I'm all for safety. Don't get me wrong. I'm 100% for safety. But when we start putting in codes, it started means additional cost for commercial to be here in Lake Stevens. And right now, we need as much commercial to come to Lake Stevens as possible. And we add additional costs and additional revenues, especially when we're trying as hard as we can to get 20th Street organized and bring commercial here. We had to think about these costs when we're doing this. I understand safety and I understand doing the right thing and making sure that people are safe. But these costs, they make it very prohibitive for companies and people to build and bring commercial into Lake Stevens.
I don't disagree. I absolutely understand where you're coming from. Again, the only thing I would mention is that we have two different pieces we're talking about here. The fire code amendments, which do speak to what you're saying. Those were those costs and additional methods that are required. But then we've got the administrative provisions that wouldn't affect something like that. So, but I completely get what you're saying.
I totally understand what you're saying. And look, we're all in the name of safety. We want everyone to be safe. We want people in buildings to be safe and to make it easy as possible for our firefighters to keep people safe. But at the same time, we got to think about balancing costs. We've got to think about balancing construction and the expense that goes along with construction. It's easy to be at our position and say, let's make sure everything's safe, but then put a number to that safety. We put a number and a cost to building and oversight and everything goes along with that and testing and everything else. That number gets very, very significantly large very, very quickly. Just want to make sure that's out there. So
absolutely.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Eric's got his hand up.
Yeah. So Ryan, does the city have any say, like Public Works, in this Appendix D, Section 503, as far as these access standards? Is that something that we adopt into our eds that matches the fire district? Or is it the fire district standard and the city really doesn't have a say in the access requirements? And mostly just in plats, right? The turning radiuses and some of the hammerhead dimensions and some of those other things that seem very restrictive. Does the city have any say in that?
Well, I would say that of course, the city has a say in our jurisdiction on what we want to amend or what we want to include, as long as it doesn't diminish the code requirements. However, we generally would rely on the experience of the professionals that do that work and take into consideration, for instance, what the fire marshal is proposing. But I think that there's always, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's always that ability for us to say, that doesn't work here, and what's our other alternatives.
Well, didn't you just say that the state leaves that totally up to the city, or they pulled that out of the code?
If we're talking about the fire code stuff there, that again is what Mike was speaking on. It sounds like the state has given the local jurisdictions the authority to choose what they want to do. Mike, is that correct?
Yeah, certainly. And everything that's stated here is absolutely correct. As far as standards, we are your partner. We're more a partner than some of the other utilities that you work with daily in your city. And anything that we might propose, we want it to be synchronized with the eds and other, public works standards, engineering standards. As your partner in protecting your city, it's about making sure that everybody's on the same page with things. If it was left up to the fire district, we would have proposed something to you that says, hey, you ought to put fire sprinklers in every single residential structure, every single 1 and 2 family dwelling. And that's not what we proposed here, because we partnered with city staff and city staff wasn't ready to jump on board with that recommendation. So absolutely, we're synchronized with what Public Works is looking for, what engineering is looking for, what city council is looking for.
Thanks, Mike. I think that was a little clearer a little better swing than I took at it.
So
Yeah, and just, if I could, just one final comment, just for the sake of clarity, when you're talking about affordable housing, none of these proposals change any of that, because the model codes adopted by the state in the residential code and building code and fire code, they already require fire sprinkler protection in any commercial residential occupancy, like where you'd find most of your affordable housing to be. And so this doesn't have any impact on affordable housing. I just want council to be comfortable knowing that.
Okay, so if there's any other questions, be happy to answer that. I've also used some additional information and notes in this presentation that I didn't include on it, just to kind of bring down the content a little. If you find those helpful or you're interested, I could definitely send a copy that can be distributed to you for your reference. And with that, are we ready to move on here?
Mary, do you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to say I'd be interested in those notes.
Great. I will get the complete package to Kelly, and then she can distribute it out to anyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Ryan. So great presentation on that. And I think you're up for the next one for a code of compliance update.
Okay, let me see if I can get this figured out here. I'm going to close that one down. I'm just going to okay, are we good?
Good, Ryan.
Okay, so the second part of this is to discuss updates to our code compliance process. The overall goal being is streamline the code compliance for more effective use of resources in order to achieve favorable results in early compliance in violation cases. Before we discuss some of the current barriers, I'd like to give some background. Civil infraction is basically the same as a ticket, for instance, a speeding ticket. Infractions are most commonly issued by a law enforcement officer, but in some cases can also be issued by a limited commission officer, such as parking or animal control officers. A notice of violation, or NOV, is an administrative notice which is issued by city staff. An infraction is filed in district court, who would also hear any appeals, whereas appeals of an NOV are heard by a hearing examiner. Oh, I went too fast. So when we have a violation and voluntary compliance is not gained, the city currently pursues further action through a notice of violation, the administrative process. So the provisions for enforcing violations in Lake Stevens Municipal Code are currently spread across multiple titles, creating a conflicting and inefficient enforcement process. Here are a few of those conflicting provisions. Title 17 contains many of the enforcement provisions, and the provisions in Title 17 require the issuance of a separate notice of violation for each day a violation continues unresolved. However, civil violations are also addressed in Title 972, and that title limits the issuance of NOVs at 2. Nuisance activity is covered under Title 960, which requires enforcement using civil infractions rather than NOVs. Lake Stevens Municipal Code places an emphasis on obtaining voluntary compliance before issuing monetary penalties or proceeding with advanced enforcement, which means it can take longer to achieve compliance. As referenced earlier, the code currently requires an issuance of a notice of violation for each day a violation continues versus issuance of one notice with cumulative fines. This limits the city's ability to efficiently issue and collect fines. Staff recommendation is to refine and improve our actions in order to reduce initial response time and initiate enforcement action sooner. To do that, we should organize and amend the municipal code to create one clear and concise enforcement title. Part of that is to develop a standardized approach to all enforcement actions, but maintain flexibility to utilize a variety of mechanisms as appropriate for a particular case. Additionally, we should utilize a consistent and advanced enforcement process for non-compliance and repeat offenses. We should also reduce our ministerial actions that increase overall timelines and to achieve our positive results. And by this, I mean develop a hybrid notice that promotes voluntary compliance, but yet transitions to an NOV where compliance is not achieved. And these notices would be issued at the time of initial investigation and during contact with the person responsible for the violation. This would help reduce redundant or numerous letters that carry no enforcement leverage or penalties. Additionally, the code should clarify that the enforcement process will remain administrative, meaning appeals are heard by a hearing examiner rather than a court. This should help reduce costs and accelerate compliance timelines. We also want to allow for fines and penalties at the outset of enforcement proceedings. And again, those fines can accumulate per violation per day for each day those violations continue uncorrected. We want to retain the flexibility to send unpaid monetary penalties to collections or file a lien on the property. And this would include the recovery of costs for abatement and enforcement, including staff costs and legal fees. We should clarify when to record violation notices on the property title and to limit transfer or sale of the property while an enforcement case is active. Copy the lender and insurer on violation correspondence in addition to the property owner. And the support of council and city leadership is important when enforcement actions are taken. On a related note, improving our electronic case tracking software will also be helpful. Many software applications can provide automatic status updates to the reporting persons, allow users to review case history and the actions that have been taken, and also allow improved tracking and follow-up actions for the code enforcement officer. And by making these improvements, staff believes our code compliance process will be more efficient and yield positive results sooner. That one's much shorter. Any questions?
Hey, Ryan. So I know right now the code enforcement isn't, my experience that there's tracking, I guess, isn't the best. What's being done to track and monitor compliance? Because I could think of at least one instance where it's been a protracted amount or significant amount of time since initial violation, and there's been a limited follow-up. And I can think of a second instance where there's been ongoing for a while, and I'm not sure what action's being taken on that. So what's being done to follow up and monitor these things to make sure they're handled efficiently?
Well, typically we would follow a process where we, again, request a voluntary compliance and issue a notice of compliance, and then follow up our notice of violation, and then follow up on that when those deadlines are achieved or when those deadlines are reached. Unfortunately, we've had some turnover in there, and I believe we've lost traction on some of these cases that haven't received the attention they should have. In addition to that, it's very difficult at this time with a split position and the amount of building inspections we have. That said, it's not an excuse. And at this time, we're working hard to identify these ones that have been overlooked and trying to make best use of the tools we have now to get back to them. As far as the particular cases you are asking about, I would be happy to look up the history on those, but I'm just guessing it's one that fell through and staff hadn't followed up on in a timely manner.
And I think our budget's going to help for the upcoming year is going to help address that issue of the split position, because it's really not fair. I mean, really, to have someone, I know with all the work you guys are doing with the permits, to also do code enforcement, and it just kind of puts you in a tough spot, frankly, to try and do both.
It does, definitely, but I don't want to use that as a crutch. I think that we could definitely do a better job and with our staff resources, but absolutely it will help, and extremely looking forward to that.
I just had a question, Brian. Is putting a lien on property something that happens very often?
In my limited time with the city, I have not seen that to this point yet. We do have one property where we are proceeding to do that now. And this property was one that was difficult to obtain compliance. The owner kept ignoring us, and we'd accumulated quite a bit of fines. And again, no response from this person. And so we are looking to record the current costs of resources that we spent on that, in addition to previous fines that were assessed and never paid. They were sent to collections and withdrawn. As far as before my time, that's probably something Russ can answer more accurately.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And it is true. So collections for us has been a better way to go than liens on properties, just because it's more immediate, and there is more process when you go to liens, and you have to get legal involved, etc. And I know that our finance staff has had a preference up to this point that we just go through collections, but that's something that Ryan and I have talked about quite a bit, that if going to this lien route carries a bigger stick, then we're not opposed to moving in that direction.
Thank you.
I'm probably not going to have the most popular opinion here, but we are going through tough times for businesses right now. And I think businesses are trying to do everything they can do to stay in business, and posing new regulations, collections, trying to get businesses to do what everybody wants them to do. Businesses are trying to stay in business right now, and it's a tough time. I think this is something we address next year once we get past COVID, once we get past all these other things. I'm just not for putting any more regulations on any businesses or doing anything at this current moment. It's hard enough to stay in business right now as it is. I'm all in the name of safety, and everyone knows that. I very much support in the name of safety, but I'm also a small business owner. I also hear businesses out there doing everything they can do to try to stay in business right now, imposing more stuff on top of them, collections, all this other stuff. This is not something, and this is not the time to do it. I'm not in favor of this right now. We can have a conversation about next year, but let's help businesses get through this tough climate right now. Help them, if they're not doing it, try to find ways to help them. Collections, calling their lenders and trying to get them to do stuff against them to make mortgage payment. This is not the time. This just isn't the time to do it. Businesses are trying to stay in business right now.
Councilmember Tangent, if I may, the reason this issue has come up is not due to businesses that violate city code. The thrust of this analysis, I guess you might say, or rewrite, are they've arisen due to problem single-family, multifamily residences, where we have situations where people, one specific example I can point to, had not weeks, but probably months of garbage stacked in their driveway. And so it becomes a health issue for the neighboring property owners. This isn't focused at businesses. This is focused at, Russ can probably answer this more than anybody. The amount of complaints that we get for code violations is probably 95% single family versus 5%.
It also affects businesses too, Gary.
I get that, but this isn't the focus of this rewrite is to give the staff more tools to address these things in a expeditious manner rather than waiting for months on end before any kind of action is taken, irregardless if it's a business or a single family or multifamily. It's to give the staff the ability to actually take some action in a timely manner. So
Then rewrite it so it doesn't affect businesses.
well, businesses aren't exempt. So it applies to everybody across the board. I'm just saying, as far as the number of complaints the city gets, it's predominantly against single family residences. And I think
I agree with you, but at the same time, it's a tough enough climate right now. That's all I'm saying.
it's tough for everybody. It's tough for everybody.
So one thing I'd like to add, if I can, is I do not disagree with you at all as far as the businesses, and I don't want to make things more difficult for anybody, residents or businesses. I would say just anecdotal numbers, businesses probably don't even make up 1% of the violations that we get. But in addition to that, even with the people that we do deal with, we make every effort for voluntary compliance and avoid fines whenever possible and minimize those fines. I think out of the 60 cases that we currently have at this point, I'd say less than 10%, 6 of those that we're actively pursuing fines on. So it wouldn't be the intent of staff or even myself to run out and start writing fines to everybody. But absolutely, I understand your concerns, and definitely we've had some businesses where there's been an issue, but none of them have risen to a level where we've needed to take advanced enforcement or even consider fines.
I have a question that may be unanswerable. I'm curious though. Would you be able to ballpark, let's say over the last year, the number of residences that you've encountered that are dealing with code enforcement issues? How many of those residences have occupants who are potentially suffering from a social health issue? So an untreated mental health issue, substance use disorder, extreme poverty, job loss, some sort of extreme social crisis. I'm just wondering how prevalent that is in this area.
I can answer that, Ryan.
Thank you.
I would say over the last several years, there is always an ongoing, and I'm not a psychologist and don't pretend to be, but I would say that there is always an element of our code enforcement that's on the fringe of society, whether it's a mental illness, advanced poverty. That's definitely some of that customer base, but there's also just a lot of average people that are just ignorant to the rules, and those are the folks that we really try to work with. In the cases of the ones that do need social services, we usually work hand in hand with PD, and we will try to point them in the direction of services, but we're definitely limited to what we can provide in that type of service.
Certainly. I'm aware of some other cities that are utilizing some embedded social service professionals along with code enforcement to help address that issue. Would the folks that you encounter that have maybe the mental health issues or other contributing factors, would those be folks that you might be more flexible around levying fines or liens or that sort of thing? Is that kind of a situation that would warrant that leniency?
Yeah.
Let me just say absolutely. And in our discussion with city staff and working to kind of reconstruct your code, this has been a topic of discussion. And certainly when you get your code enforcement person on staff, that person is going to have the time to, as we talked about, I think at a previous meeting, to collect and have the available catalog of community resources, whether they be NGOs or whether they be citizen groups, business groups, or whatever, that can come in and lend a hand for those situations where our violator, really it's beyond them to be able to take care of the matter, whatever the reason that might be. But certainly looking at, is this a situation where it's really just in need help, some additional resources. We want to be sure to build that into the process and to give that a look in every case so that we're not ignoring that. And I know your staff has that as a prime concern.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, Russ.
Go ahead, Sean. You had your hand up a long time ago.
Yeah, and I think Ryan kind of talked to this a little bit, but for Ryan or Russ, whoever can best answer the question, with the proposed changes, historically the intent has been to get voluntary compliance. And I think what I heard from Ryan is, even with these new tools to streamline this process, is that there's still a desire to continue with that, recognizing that most people truly, a lot of the cases that where we see violations, it's because people are not necessarily aware of all of the codes that are applicable to whatever it is they're trying to do. And it's really important that we take those opportunities to educate people. We don't want to disincentivize productive action for people to improve the value of their property. How do we make sure that with this streamlined process that doesn't creep over time and shift into a system where our code says we seek voluntary compliance first, but in action, we end up in a situation where we are much more likely to move towards fines? How do we measure and protect against that shift in behavior or philosophy?
Well, one way is if you institutionalize that, is in your code, you have an NOV structure that gets an early release of the NOV, but the NOV structure gives time for the person to correct the problem without the fine. And the NOV is very clear about that. But then again, it's also very clear that you've got this many days. If you need more days for whatever reason, then you need to contact the city staff, and we'll listen to your issue and try to accommodate it. But the message is still built in that if you don't voluntarily comply and get this done at this point that we designate in the NOV, then the fines will be in place and they will be applied. But it's going to be built into your structure that there is an opportunity to get this corrected without any sort of fine or penalty. And it's simply going to be institutionalized in how you do business.
Okay.
Sean, I would say I think you're going in the right direction. Where I'm with this too is I just don't want to turn this over to where fines become automatic. People don't have options. If someone's not in compliance, you're probably not going to contact them and not be in compliance. There's, Angie, I think you're going to mental health. It would be my guess with where you're at with this. And I just don't want to separate people from homes. I don't want to make it harder on businesses. I don't want to make it harder. But Gary, I hear you when I say I want compliance too. It's a tough balancing act. So that's all I'm going to say.
And
So
one thing to add on to that, I'm sorry, Kim, really quickly. We are proposing to reduce the amount of the fines because the amount of fines we have now approximate a criminal fine. And if we're really truly wanting to follow this civil process, then we need to adjust our fines to reflect that as well. So that will be coming forward as well. Councilmember Daughtry.
So we mentioned this before, and I think Angie was going that direction. Sean said something about it. And that is that we want to try to find a way to help the people that need the help. And so while I want to get Marcus and I have talked about this for a couple of years before, where we want to streamline this process, and all of our processes need to be more streamlined, so we don't have to go to this code and then this code and then that code, and oh, by the way, this code says look at that code. That's all just ridiculous. Nobody can figure that stuff out. You're going to miss something somewhere. But if we can, in parallel with this streamlining of this particular process, come up with a way or a method or a process to reach out to those organizations that would be helping. I mean, first off, if it's a veteran, then you ought to be talking to the Veterans Commission. I mean, we have a city commission right there. Talk to the Veterans Commission, have the code enforcement officer say, hey, I got a veteran's got a problem here. What can you guys do to help? If there's other issues, mental health issues, if we do have an embedded person we could use, that'd be great. If not, then who do we get involved? But I think that we need to set that process up in parallel with fixing our process so that when we do get the code enforcement person, it's ready and we're not going to lose anybody. Because I agree with Marcus on this. This is not the time to be, hammering on people, but it is a time to be able to help people. And that's what we need to be doing as a city, is helping people. But there's other problems in the city that have been recurring problems with the same people, and those need to be taken care of. And it could very well be that there is a mental health issue there that maybe we didn't know about, or it very well could be that we have a homeowner that is renting to somebody that is just not being responsive. So I understand all that. But if we do both of them in parallel, I don't know what it looks like. I'd be more than happy to be on any kind of a team to put that together, but we need to do it in parallel. We can't do this in series.
So Kim, we've already talked a little bit about that. We talked about getting the community service groups together to help with the cleanup. And one of the things that we talked about was code enforcement, kind of like Angie brought up. You come into a person who's physically or emotionally not able to take care of whatever's going on. You can identify, like you said, a veteran or some other group that is willing to step in and help out. The ultimate goal is compliance, but we also need to have some teeth with the process.
Well, I'm not saying don't have the teeth. I'm just saying we need to be parallel paths.
But yeah, and we can do that. I think we can work together. But when I get, people reaching out to me saying, how come you're letting this garbage pile up, construction debris, on Chapel Hill Road? It's now, many yards. It's probably a 20 by 10 pile now, probably 6 feet high. And people are driving by that saying, what's going on? And it's just there and it continues going on. People got a problem with that. I don't think that's mental illness. I don't think that's, maybe it's ignorance, like Russ said, but, we need to be able to address those in a timely way so the problems don't continue. And for what it's worth, for Ryan and Russ, I'm a big proponent of suspended fines, saying, hey, we're going to impose this fine if you comply within this timeline. If you choose not to comply, then this is what the action is. I found in other avenues that to be an effective tool.
Absolutely. That's been my experience as well, that it helps to give us the flexibility to suspend those, but still motivate someone into compliance. And I think the vast majority of the cases that we have, they are resolved without fines or advanced enforcement. It's just those outliers. And even if we went to fine them $1,000 a day, it wouldn't make a difference to them. And so, as Councilmember Frederick and Daughtry have both said, I think finding support for those people, educational, it's very invaluable. And from what I found in my experience was, it just takes legwork of the code enforcement officer to contact those different agencies, the different groups, whether they're church groups or Veterans Association, to build those relationships to get them out there so they have a resource to go back to. It's definitely possible. It just takes them putting forth the effort to do it. And I think with that guidance from myself and other staff members, that we could get our new code compliance officer to go at things to where we're looking for more supportive, educational, and not use these hammers and fines unless we're in a situation where they backed us into a corner, for lack of a better term. That, we want to work with people to get them cleaned up without penalizing them.
I'm happy to take off my city hat and put on my other hat and help develop information about resources that are available. Just let me know.
Fantastic.
Okay, so great discussion on that. Be looking forward to seeing what you come up with, Ryan. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is full-time mayor benefits. Anya.
Good evening, everybody. As you know, the Salary Commission established the full-time mayor salary at $80,000 a year, and that is effective in just a few short days here. And it's up to the council to establish benefits that would go along with the base salary. And some things I just wanted to bring a discussion forward before we take it to action at a council meeting. So this is kind of just an open discussion. But you know, some of the recommendations or thoughts that you can think about is, you know, matching what we have for the non-represented city staff as far as, you know, medical, vision, dental plans that we have, long-term, the LTD insurance and life insurance, and you know, possibly like deferred comp matching is a thought, or clothing allowances. Those are other benefits that the city council could add to the mayor's benefit package. So we'd love to just hear thoughts and answer questions if you have any questions about the benefits that we already offer to city employees. And then our plan would be then to move it forward for action next council meeting.
I'd be glad to jump in here. I guess I would say I look at what the compensation for the mayor is, and it doesn't meet the comparable cities. So what they did, I was actually a little bit disappointed in, because the goal was to put him at a comparable salary and comparable level of what everyone else is at, or comparable cities. That's what we compare everybody to. We look at, you know, all the comparable cities, and I'm just going to say we want them to be compensated fairly to what all of our comparable cities are. And I don't think the Salary Commission met that job. I'm just going to say that outright. No disrespect to them, but I don't think they looked at the comparables fairly. And Brett's doing a great job for us, and I hope that his hard efforts continue to benefit the city. For that, I think we should be compensating him at the council level is comparable as what the other city employees are getting, gas stipend, all those things. I would think that we look at a package that puts Brett in a favorable position for everything that he's doing for us. He's being compensated at a significantly lower level than every other comparable mayor in the city. His numbers don't hit those numbers, what the comparables are. It was disappointing for me. I'm just going to say it.
Anya, as part of the things that you mentioned, the additional benefits was, I'm assuming you kind of went through a menu of things, wondering if there's, one of the duties of the mayor is obviously to represent us outside the city, and wondering if there's a comparable analysis for meetings that are attended, Puget Sound Regional Council, you know, a stipend for that, any meetings that are outside the city of Lake Stevens.
So I think, and Greg might want to weigh in on this, but I think that falls under his compensation, the salary, the base salary, actually, the paying for meetings. And that would be something that the Salary Commission would have to establish an extra dollar amount assigned, like they do for the council already.
Right. I would agree with that.
So Anya, is there a dollar limit? Because really, you know, Marcus was spot on, because in reviewing the Salary Commission's deliberations and discussions, and I'll just note for the record, I participated in every minute of all those discussions for my own edification. They seem to lump the benefits and compare that with salary, and saying, hey, we have salary, you know, hey, they're getting 40% more. And so that's equates to, if we give them 80,000, that's another 32,000. So it's really $112,000 that the mayor's getting, instead of employees, you know, they're getting paid $80,000, are already getting that. And so is there a dollar value that we can attach to that? Because looking at the comparables, I mean, the comparable cities were making, you know, right around 100,000. So, if what Marcus is saying, to make up that difference in compensation, is there a limit as far as what the, vehicle stipend, gas stipend, whatever, thing that might be included in that package in addition to the regular benefits?
There's no dollar amount limit. Which you add on has to be truly a benefit that doesn't look like salary, that doesn't look like compensation for the time spent in the position doing the work. It has to look and feel like a benefit, like whether it's a car allowance, whether it's a 401k contribution, extra matching, or something like that. But the statutes, once you assign the salary to a salary commission, they set it, and that's what by statute it has to be, as long as it remains with the salary commission.
Yeah, and I get that. Yeah.
Anya, I'm wondering, just, we aren't nearly as familiar with the salary options or menu items or packages as you are. I'm wondering if it makes sense to come back with like 3 options or something, where there's kind of the base level benefits package, and then what you talked about, the non-represented staff, what their benefits package typically looks like, and then like maybe what a Cadillac benefits package would look like, so that we can sort of see what the differences are and maybe have something to choose from, rather than in this conversation kind of talking about bits and pieces of what a benefits package might contain. I don't know.
Well, what we do for city staff is we have all of our medical insurance plans, and then they get to choose. So we have several options. And so that's probably what I would recommend, is if you're gonna authorize the mayor to enroll in our medical, dental, vision plan with AWC, then he would then pick from those plans, just like another staff member would. So there's not really like different packages. I think when you go into like different packages, you're looking at that clothing allowance, which we don't give other staff. Deferred comp matching, I know, is in our proposed budget. So
we give clothing stipends to the police department and so forth.
Right. Sorry, I'm talking about non-represented staff mostly.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. There are other combinations that other staff do get to include those extras. And so it would just, we can prepare like a recommendation if you'd like for the next council meeting for action. We can do that.
That would be very helpful, I think, to see that. I'm looking for bottom line.
Do you want to know, what the dollar amount or the cost would be with those and all of that information, I'm assuming?
Well, this is the people's money, so yes, I would like to see that.
It's just hard to show you. I mean, I can show you a spreadsheet right now of just our monthly health insurance rates and what the employer pays for each of those, and then what the employee pays. But like I said, if you give him the option to choose between Regents or Kaiser Permanente, those are going to be different. And so just estimating the cost is going to be difficult. I think it's more those other extras that you might want to consider on the dollar amounts.
That sounds right.
I feel like there might be, it might be helpful, and I think maybe this is where Angie was going, but there's obviously a really broad spectrum of things that could potentially be benefits. And it might be helpful to have some options, some potential ideas of things that may be common as benefits for elected officials outside of medical, dental, those things that we commonly see as far as the benefit packages for other non-represented employees.
Okay. Can definitely put something together for the next meeting.
Yeah, I think Angie and Sean are pretty spot on there. I think of the standard things, the medical, dental, everything that a regular employee gets. I mean, that's as an employee, those are going to be available as a standard thing. I think what at executive level, I look at like Mayor Naring. He gets a car allowance. He gets some other things in addition to his $150,000 a year salary. And so I think those are things that we can put a dollar value on and say, hey, we're going to give X amount for clothing or vehicle or whatever those things are that are outside what a regular employee would have. And considering that executives typically have different compensation than people, line workers, and regular staff.
Okay. Any other thoughts, recommendations?
Am I hearing next meeting, the 24th?
This is Gary. This is just kind of a commentary, but it seems as if we're kind of beating around the bush, I guess, as to we all feel that the Salary Commission's recommendation is probably not adequate. So I guess I'm putting on the table maybe a review of having a Salary Commission. And if that is a something that is maybe more of a recommendation category rather than an outright, this is what it will be, for future reference. So just a thought that maybe we should have that discussion for future reference.
Yeah, you could add to that. I mean, the primary benefit of one of the primary benefits of a salary commission, it allows for an increase in the compensation paid to council members during their term of office. Because otherwise, if you're setting it yourself, you cannot increase the compensation paid to a council member, the people that approve what your salary is during your term of office. The same isn't necessary true for the mayor. The mayor doesn't vote on their salary, and you could have a salary commission that determines, for example, the council's compensation, but you determine the mayor's compensation because you can increase the mayor's compensation during their term of office. So that's just another thought.
I would say that we need to make sure the Salary Commission has got better information, or they need to be more up to date on salaries, and we didn't give enough information to make an informed decision on this, or they just felt something completely different than the rest of the council. Because when we were briefed, we had a range that we thought that he would be in, and this was significantly below. And if we're going to have a full-time mayor, and we all agreed and we voted on a full-time mayor, whether you voted or didn't vote for or against it, is at the end of the day, we wanted a full-time mayor. And his salary is not comparable. And I have to say, I'm really disappointed in where the Salary Commission went with this. That's why we're talking, Gary. I think you brought it out. It's like, okay, maybe they didn't hit the mark. Maybe we need to give them better information. Maybe we need better people who understand the value of having a full-time mayor. I don't know what happened in this situation, but I am significantly concerned about where the Salary Commission went with this. You can't undercompensate someone who's such a valuable asset to the city. And this was voted on by the council, and we had a range where we thought he was going to be. And then to me, I'm disappointed with the Salary Commission on this one. That's where I'm at.
Well, Marcus, and you should be. If you listen to the discussion, Anya did an outstanding job presenting comparables from the other cities. The information was made available. But, some of the commentary that was there was not reflective of making it a comparable thing. It was about, initially they were talking $60,000 a year, right up until the end of when they changed it to 80,000. So, even though comparable cities are paying at least $100,000 for their mayor, so how they got to 80,000 and how they did that, I'm not sure what their thought process was on it, but if you listen to the comments, and I'll let you, do that on your own, but the comments didn't really reflect a thoughtful process in my view.
I think the conversation around a salary commission, having one or not, or what that looks like, makes really good sense. I think we probably need to have that at some point in the future, given that we're not really prepared to have that discussion tonight.
Unless the council can make a decision, as Greg was pointing out, if the council can take control of the mayor's salary, and we can still have the, salary commission for the council, but we can control the mayor's salary, that's maybe something we take into our own hands. I think this is something that needs to be relooked at. I don't know. I'm disappointed where this went.
Well, I want to speak in a positive way for the salary commission, because these were volunteers and they did give their time, and I want to thank them for that. Maybe they didn't have enough information. I also want to thank our mayor, who's working so hard. I do appreciate all that he's doing. So putting those together, where we decide to go, I don't want to fail to thank the salary commission for the time they gave us. And that was on our direction. And so maybe we didn't give them enough information. I don't know whether we decide to do it through the council instead. That's a different question, but I do want to thank them, and I want to thank the mayor as well.
So do you want to have that be a discussion item for, kind of pursuant to what Gary and Marcus talked about? So not in the next council meeting, but the next workshop, the first council meeting in December, we can have that be a topic for the workshop. And in the meantime, Anya can maybe get us the rest of the council, if we didn't get at the comparables for the other cities, and just have a look to help facilitate our discussion.
Greg, what would it take to go along that avenue? Is there some formal recognition or ordinance or something?
Yes, right. You'll need to pass an ordinance that amends your current code provision regarding the salary commission and what its authority is.
Could we, as a council, instruct staff to draft something for us to at least start that discussion?
You can do that.
I would propose that, along Councilmember Ewing's thoughts, that we have something to discuss as to, and I would agree, Angie, I don't think tonight is the night we talk about a salary commission. I'm just putting it out there as far as a thought process, because it's caused a little consternation, I guess. But I would propose that we direct staff to prepare some sort of direction as to how we would take the salary determination away from the salary commission, and have a discussion about that here at the next workshop.
Okay, we can get that on the agenda.
I think that's a great thought. I'd like to put this in the council's hands myself. So if you guys can put that together, I'd appreciate it.
All right, Anya, you got good direction?
Yes, thank you, everybody.
All right. Let's move on to a possibly easier subject, council start time with Kelly.
Yes, so this was on your agenda last week, but due to time got pushed out a little bit, and I thought maybe we needed to wait for the whole council as well. So glad Marcus is here to join us. As you know, September 25th retreat, you guys discussed a possible earlier council start time. I think we talked about 6 o'clock or 6:30. And it was at that retreat that you had asked us to put a survey out on our website to find out how residents felt about it. And we did receive 57 responses. And I think just very few, like less than 5 people did vote for 6:30, additional voted for 6:30. And the rest voted for 6 o'clock. So it was very close. We drafted an ordinance for your review tonight that would make the start time 6 o'clock. But certainly want to have that discussion, and whatever the council's direction is, we can bring it back to the next meeting if you're ready to go. And can be 6 o'clock or 6:30 or whatever the desire is. So opening it up for discussion.
Yeah, I think the survey should have had the option of 4 o'clock start time there. So I'm gonna vote against anything that doesn't include a 4 o'clock start time.
My only question about the survey was, why did it say preferred 6 o'clock? It's like getting a ballot and it says, I prefer you vote for this. I just thought that was odd. Gotta say.
That might have been from our discussion at the retreat, that maybe more of the consensus of the council was 6 o'clock. I'm not sure.
I'm for the 6 o'clock meeting time with Zoom and everything we've got going on. And I think moving into the future, I think a lot of these meetings should be by Zoom. Whether we ever go back to all meetings where we show up at the same spot, or 50-50 being Zoom meetings versus live and in person, who knows where it's going to go. I'm all for 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, people can join by their phone. They can be at their office. They can be at their home. I feel like the feedback we've gotten from people joining in remotely has been great. And a lot of people who maybe are hesitant or too busy to show up via, showing up live and in person has been great online. So for me, I like the 6 o'clock start time. It's something that we can change if we're unhappy with it, but 6 o'clock is a great time. And it's not that I want the meeting to go from 6 to 9, but maybe we can finish up at an appropriate time for people to go to dinner and have time with their families after the meeting.
Hey, Marcus, a question for you. What can we do to ensure we don't have that meeting creep? Because I see sometimes when, meeting time starts earlier, that time just blends in and you end at the same time. So what can we do to make sure that we're efficiently using our time?
As everyone knows, I'm very efficient about meetings. I'm very much into a comment, or you want to have a conversation round robin off the topics that we have. Feel free to stay along afterwards and sit and have a conversation. But I feel like meetings need to be diligent. I think we have an agenda put in front of us. We move through the agenda as quickly as we possibly can. The whole reason of having every other week, having sessions where we can ask questions and staff can weigh in. If you go to many other council meetings, they have other times where they ask all their questions, and when it comes time for the council meeting to vote on stuff, they're very proficient with their agenda. Maybe an hour tops. If you've been to Marysville, they're moving through their agenda extremely fast because we have every other week. I mean, if we were doing this every 2 weeks having a meeting, I'd understand the meetings take this long, but we have a meeting almost every week where you can ask questions, you can call on staff, you can do it, but we are not as efficient as meetings as we can be. And I want staff to fill us in, make sure we're aware of stuff, but it's the job of every council member to reach out if you have a question about something, to call staff, to weigh in, ask appropriate questions, but move through the agenda quickly. The agenda should be moved through. And when we just go through, everyone just chatting about stuff, and at the end, asking staff questions that they're not prepared for is totally inappropriate. When we just go, is there anything else for the agenda? We spend an extra 10, 15 minutes asking staff to guess on stuff they're not prepared to ask for. I think it's totally inappropriate. But that's what adds to longer meetings. We have an agenda, we work through the meeting, we work through the agenda, and we move our way along. If the council has questions, that's what workshops are for. That's why we have workshops. That's what the staff is available to us for. We have a liaison who's there to help us through questions that we have. You should be using that and focusing on that to move these agendas along. I hope that answers your question.
The only thing we don't have any control over is the times we allow the public to speak. That's one of the things that always drives us a long time. So, and we don't have control over that because that's their right. Wouldn't even try to control that. But that's another thing that adds to it.
Well, Kim, if you remember when we first started, we would never spend 40 minutes on council agenda and everything that goes along with that. Council agenda and all that would take 15, 20 minutes tops. We're into 45 minutes sometimes before we even get started on the agenda. That's problematic in itself.
I have a quick question about the start time. I'm pretty neutral about the 6 or the 6:30 time, but I have a job that sometimes demands that I stay past 6 because of emergencies that come up. So how would that happen if I were unable to log in at the start time of the meeting?
Well, just to put it simply, if you miss 3 times, you're out. No, just.
Wait, Angie.
Consecutive. That's consecutive. Yeah. Unexcused.
Oh yeah, we
I
always
missed the
excuse
meeting,
people.
but
So.
I
That's
would
right.
potentially not be there for the beginning. So
No, that's
what
the
is-
only. Really, that's the only thing that I'm worried about too. Is most of us do have a job, and sometimes I'm getting home at 6 and don't have enough time to breathe to get into the, to review the agenda one more time before we get into it. That's what I do. It doesn't mean I can't change, but I know, Angie, you have a little bit different. I'm self-employed. I can look in the mirror and say, hey, boss, you need to be over there. And so the only boss I really have to answer to is my client, which has usually been pretty simple. So 6:30 is better for me, but I can make 6 o'clock work. But I can see that there's probably a couple of other people on here like Sean and Angie and maybe even Steve that might not be able to make that work. I don't know.
For me, I think the biggest thing is the reason why we're trying to move this up is because we're creeping into 9:30, 10 o'clock a lot of times because these meetings are going longer than they've ever gone. And
well, last week we really broke through the 10 o'clock. So
I'm glad I wasn't there. But I think a lot of times our meetings can be significantly more proficient and we can move through these meeting agenda items. I want all the questions to be flushed out. I want all the banter to go back and forth. That's what makes good decisions. But I'm just saying, a lot of times we waste a lot of time with just going through stuff that's not even on the agenda. Just saying. And I'm sometimes ask myself, how do we get so far away from the agenda and moving through the agenda quickly? That's my point.
Hey, well, let me to keep us on the agenda and moving along. Let me suggest that we try the 6 o'clock time frame and give that a shot for a good quarter and then reassess it at that time. And if Angie keeps showing up late, then maybe we go to 6:30.
Or maybe we just kick her off. Who knows? We'll find out.
I don't want to kick you off.
No,
I don't want to kick you off.
the team.
Excused every time.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've brought up before, and I know I did it in a workshop last year when Angie and Mary came on, is that if there's something that we're not comfortable with that's on the agenda, it's within our power to take it off the agenda. And we need to use that, especially if we're trying to cut time. So for me, if I find something on the agenda, yeah, I call the staff once in a while and ask questions during the week when I get the agenda. So after Thursday night, maybe Friday or Monday, I give a call to Russ or whatever, just to clarify something. Marcus and I have been on the council for quite a while, so we kind of understand most of the stuff that's going on. But once in a while, I have a question. And so if I'm doing that, great. But there's other times where, okay, I am confused. I don't understand what's going on. Or maybe something came on the agenda that we're just not apprised of in the workshop the week before. I'm just not comfortable with having it on the agenda. I'm going to ask to remove it to either discussion or to the workshop. And we've done that in the recent past, and it's worked really well. So I don't want anybody to forget that we can do that as a council. It is our agenda.
Absolutely. As the council goes, we go. I mean, if there's something you're uncomfortable being on the agenda at a certain time, let me know. I'm glad to move it to another time. If you're uncertain about it, call the staff, get clarification. That's what the staff is there for. They're there to help us make great decisions. So don't be afraid to call into staff and get the help you need and to make you aware of the decision that you're making.
With the caveat that there are some time sensitive things that pop up once in a while that we may not be able to move, but just to be real.
Well, that would be the council decision to either move it as a vote or not move it forward, depending on how important it is, right? I mean, that's what we're all here for.
I just want to add, I appreciate how responsive staff is to, my requests either by email or by phone. I've just been really impressed with how responsive staff has been to things that I've brought to them. So thank you.
So if it does go to council at the next meeting, consent or action, whatever you choose, it would go into effect the way the ordinance is written right now for the December 8th regular meeting. Would be the first time we would try the new start time, unless you tell staff that you want this to start at a different time. I
I
mean,
think it's great to follow what the mayor just said at 6 o'clock and put it on the consent agenda.
right?
I'm there too.
Sounds right. Sounds good.
That's just great. Be on the consent agenda next meeting, and it'll be in effect not for the workshop on the 1st, but for the December 8th meeting. And I'll send you some reminders about that.
But don't worry, Angie, we got your back.
Appreciate it.
Let's hit the next one, the council retreat dates and location.
Yes, I have this next one, and I just want to share screen real quick. I hope you guys can see this. I do want to try to close this conversation and hopefully finalize our location and our date for the upcoming retreat. So can you all see my screen? Yes? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So the I was looking at were the last weekend in January, Friday, January 29th and Saturday, January 30th. So when I contacted these venues, that's the dates I gave them. A few of these we talked about already. I'm putting them back on there. Suncadia Resort. They are available. They're, it's over 200 something miles away round trip. We talked about La Conner. They're also available a little closer, but it didn't sound like that was the consensus of the council. Someone gave me an idea of Alderbrook, which is a beautiful place. They are not available that weekend. If for some reason you do want that location, they're available many other weekends in February, but not that weekend. And then we also talked about a local option, Indigo, which looks beautiful. I haven't been there, but the lady sent me pictures and it was gorgeous. So obviously no hotel cost for that since it would be local. I'm not sure if we would do dinner on our own, but these costs are basically for room rental and for breakfast and lunch for 2 days. So if we want the full meal deal at Indigo, and if we want to stay local, we're looking at about $5,200 for 2 days for all of us. And that is, a hot meal breakfast. It's everything. It's the room rental. It's the comfy chairs. It's the whole meal deal. Now, we can take that down a little bit in price if that seems steep to you. We can do continental breakfast. We can, their meals tend to be a little bit higher than some of the other hotels. I imagine they're pretty good, has great food. But I can work on that cost a little bit if that's a sticker shock. That's basically what we're looking at. I also got the idea of Skamania, but I think that is quite a bit away. That's 250 miles each way. So I did not get into details with them. So I just wanted to know where the council is leaning. Are we still looking at the local option? And if so, does this price sound good at the $175 per person for everything? Or I can work on the cost. I'm open. I know we're at 8:48 p.m. and I know we're trying to keep on timeline. So just tell me where you want me to go and I'll get it finalized. I'd like to get something on their books because they are filling up.
I would choose either Suncadia or La Conner myself.
Okay.
And Marcus, you have a preference as far as which one you would choose, put 1 and 2?
I would probably choose La Conner over 1 and 2 just because it's close to 47 miles each way. It's there's something to be said to be away from Lake Stevens, Everett area, and be a little further away. So that's for me. Every time we've had a council retreat up in La Conner, good things have happened.
Yeah.
Good. I will say a little bit of camaraderie between the council is also good as well. So
Yeah, La Conner was a good place. I liked it.
I think too, if we choose Suncadia, we run the risk of the passes having Snowmageddon and like we had a couple days ago, that would make it difficult if the pass is closed.
that's why I said La Conner is a great spot. And at the end of the day, it's comfortable and we can all have a little bit of camaraderie, probably have dinner together, interact, conversation about what we're talking about in the evenings and so forth. It's just always been very fruitful, I think, for the council. So that's my opinion.
Okay.
I'm good with La Conner. I like the reports. I'm glad you guys have had experience there. It seems like a good compromise.
Okay, I have to speak up here. Am I muted?
Yeah.
I don't know that I would go. I don't know that I should be there. We would be together, eating together in the same room, no masks. Who knows what's going to be going on in January? I've already given up Christmas with my family. So you may not see Mary Dickinson there if that's what is required. I'm sorry to say. I appreciate all the hard work, Kelly, but that's kind of how I'm feeling right now.
Would there be a Zoom option or a virtual option?
Absolutely. I was going to say in my prior city, we actually live streamed from La Conner, did meetings from there. People could join in, they could talk to the council, whatever they choose. And yeah, we can definitely accommodate a virtual option.
If we're under the same situation that we are here the next 4 weeks, I would suggest that we probably wouldn't go, correct?
I mean, great. If we're in the same situation, of course, we wouldn't go.
So I guess to encourage you, Mary, I would hope that we're not in the same situation that we are presently, and that we would have the opportunity to go. If not, then obviously we make some other arrangements. So,
well, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's been very difficult as a new council member to never see you guys. We just came in and we go away and we haven't seen each other forever. So, but right now, I would have to say right now, I'm holding off. That's all I have to say.
Just to help with planning purposes, based on the governor's guidance, I can say with a high degree of certainty, we're going to be pretty close to exactly where we are right now, because the guidance is almost that long on its own. And I think it's highly unlikely that there is going to be a decisive change in where we are in the disease. We're still going to be dealing with COVID in January and February of next year. I know that's not what people want to hear, but that's reality. You know, there are 2 vaccines that are very close to going through FDA approval. One of those requires an extremely complicated supply chain to bring it to distribution. And the other one is probably going to follow months behind that. We are going to be dealing with COVID in January and February of next year.
Great. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll cancel it. Just make sure there's a cancellation policy.
Yeah, if it's okay with the council, I'd like to just get those dates booked for us, and then certainly we can cancel as it gets closer. The Conner is actually holding that weekend for us right now. But whatever the council would like me to do.
I would also like to suggest that if we are looking at doing a virtual option and we're in a situation with COVID where the vast majority of folks are going to join virtually, that maybe we just have it at the mill versus Lake Stephen or versus La Conner and save ourselves some money.
Well, if we're only allowed 5 people inside and no business meetings, that would make that difficult. So hopefully those guidelines get relaxed a little bit.
Well, that'll still be the case. That'll be the case in the Conner too, right?
I'm sure.
I mean, I think if there's a free cancellation policy and we have, we can cancel up until a couple of weeks beforehand without penalty, then there's no harm in reserving it. I think we all just need to be sort of realistic about the fact that it's unlikely to actually happen the way it's happened in the past.
Great. Kelly, check on that for us and let us know.
Yep. And if it's a free cancellation, I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then just make sure you guys mark those 2 dates on your calendar, whether we are somewhere together or virtually for the retreat. And that's all I've got.
What were the dates again?
The dates are Friday, January 29th and Saturday, January 30th.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Kelly, hey, thanks for working that. And we have actually a really good announcement that I want to give Russ about a minute to give us.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to let you all know that we got the decision from the hearing examiner today. He has denied the Livable Lake Stevens appeal for the Costco project. So that's a green light for the project to go forward, at least at this point, pending no other appeals, but a really good decision, really thorough by the examiner, and, you know, pretty complimentary to the work that we did as a city. So good news for us.
So they lost on all counts. Is that correct, Russ?
That is.
So Costco's allowed to move forward. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
Is there anything else in their way right now?
They can file an appeal of the hearing examiner's decision to Superior Court. We don't know if they'll do that or not. And obviously, we're still working with WashDOT on the roundabout and the culvert decisions. But yeah, it was the last big obstacle.
Did the Army Corps of Engineers issued a ruling yet?
They have not.
Okay. But the DOE has, and they usually follow the DOE's recommendation. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. There were a couple people talking at once for a second there.
So the Army Corps has not, but the DOE has. Right? Department of
Department of Ecology has issued their water quality certification, and Army Corps should not be far behind.
Great.
Greg, what is the time frame for kind of a drop dead date of an appeal to Superior Court?
21 days.
21 days.
21 days and counting here. Yep.
Okay, great. Good news, Russ. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great news.
Yeah, good stuff. Any parting shots by anybody? Okay, if you haven't heard, we are on a 4th round of small business grants. So if you have anybody out there, they've got to be in by, we're going end of the day on Thursday. I did some driving around, handed out a bunch of applications today, mainly to restaurants and gyms. And but if you got anybody else out there, please have them get on our website and apply so that we can. We had about 100,000, I think, is what we ended up with left over in CARES Act money, and then Sam Lowe found additional money at the county that we're gonna put in with that pot as well, and get some money out to our folks here. Try to get them through just the next 4 weeks, right, Sean? Just the next 4 weeks, Sean.
I don't know if Sean has that much power.
I gave everyone the power. Only required a little partnership.
Wear your mask. Wear your mask.
If anybody has any questions on those grants, if you come across people who have questions on the business grants, send them my way. I'm happy to help.
All right, great. Hey, thanks for everybody's work. It's fun to be a team, and get out, do great things, and keep serving everybody. It's good stuff. Have a great evening.